Helo a chroeso I ail rhifin yn y gyfres yma o FCTV. Os nad ydych chi wedi gwylio'r rhifin cyntaf eto, ewch nôl I gwylio I pan fod gyda chi bach o amser. Yn y rhifin yma, fe fyddwn ni'n aros eto yn y maes tyfu glas welltir ac yn gweld sut mae ffermydd yma yng Nghymru wedi bod yn ceisio arloesi ac yn dygymod gyda hafau sychach a newid hinsawdd.
Yn yr rhifin yma, mi fyddwn yn clywed gan ffarmwr ifanc sydd wedi bod yn trealu cnwd go wahanol yma yng Nghymru. Fyddwn ni hefyd yn mynd I ffarm sydd wedi bod yn trealu biosymilydd wymon I weld os ydy hynny'n cael effaith ar y tyfiant porthiant yno ar y ffarm hynny a'r ansawdd I ddilyn.
Ac yn olaf, fe fyddwn ni'n ymweld â fferm beef a defaid yn Meirionydd sydd wedi bod yn ceisio dygymod gyda'r hafau sychach rydyn ni wedi bod yn gweld yn ystod y blynyddoedd diwetha, trwy ceisio edrych ar dulliau gwahanol y dyfu porfa ac o ddyrgymod gyda'r tywydd yma. Ond yn ddiweddar fe aethon ni ymweld â'r teulu Roderick sydd yn ffermio'n fferm Newton ger Aberhonddu. Mae'r teulu Roderick yn adnabyddus yn y diwydiant amaeth yma yng Nghymru ac yn ddiweddar maen nhw wedi bod yn manteisio ar gyllid ymchwil cyswllt ffermio.
Bod maglis yr Ddlas neu sy'n yn cael ei ddefnyddio'n llwyddiannus yn wyrain Lloegr ac yn Sela Newydd, ond mae llawer llai cyffredin yma yng Nghymru. Felly penderfynodd y teulu Roderick i'w dreialu yma I weld sut mae'n perfformio yn ein hinsawdd ni.
In general, we seem to be getting more extreme weather, and in 2018 and 2022 we had very dry summers. And then last winter and all this year we seem to be having more rain than usual. In response to climate change, we've been trialling taller grass grazing to allow the grass to grow taller, which allows their root structure to become more profound. This means that when we have heavy amounts of rain, the water infiltration is better, which also means that when we go into drier times, the plants can hold on to the water better. In recent years, we've been changing the sheep flock genetics to focus on animals that perform well on grass. The cows are all outwintered. This allows us to reduce our winter feed requirement and winter housing requirement also. We now grow a range of crops. All we're trying to do is make ourselves more resilient for the farm to be able to perform well in very dry and very wet conditions. We were fortunate to be successful in the tryout fund, which has allowed us to trial growing lucerne for growing and finishing lambs. Lucerne is more commonly grown in the southern hemisphere in Australia and New Zealand. It has very strong drought-tolerant properties and has deep rooting depth of up to 2 metres in free-draining soil. We believe that this crop could be an answer to fill in the gap to dry summers that we sometimes experience here at Newton Farm.
Daniel Evans a'r teulu sydd yn ffarmio ar ffarm Tan y Graig, Silian, ger Llambed. A maen nhw wedi bod yn ymchwilio I fewn i'r defnydd o biosymilydd wymon a'i weld ei effaith ar wndwn meillion o ran porthiant y cynnyrch a'r ansawdd. A hynny oll mwyn lleihau'r defnydd o wrtaith artiffisial a gweld os oes modd lleihau'r defnydd o ddwysfwyd yn y system wartheg.
Shwai, enw fi yw Daniel Evans, ffarmo fan hyn ar ffarm Tan y Graig, ger Llambed. Ni wedi bod yn gweithio gyda Farming Connect dros yr misoedd ddiwetha ar prosiectau lleihau ein input costs ar gyfer cynnyrchu da. A mae'r digwyddiadau ni ar y ffarm heddi I showcaseo beth mae Farming Connect wedi bod yn gweithio gyda ni I helpu ni wneud a ni wedi cael turnout da iawn, so ni'n ddiolchgar o hwnna.
So thank you all for coming, and thank you to Farming Connect for all the work organising the event. So welcome everyone to Tan y Graig. My name is Daniel Evans, for those of you that don't know me. I'm the 5th generation to farm here. I farm alongside my father Dai and my mother Eryl. We have 450 breeding ewes, 350 of which are Welsh mules, and the other 100 are Welsh mountain. We also have a herd of 45 suckler cows, mostly Belgian blues. We've actually introduced a few stabilisers in the last year, just to see how their performance compares to the Belgian blues. So previously, with bought-in feed being one of our main costs in the production of beef and lamb, we now aim to finish as much of the stock off of grass as we can. So in recent years, we managed to finish most of the lambs off of grass grown on the farm, with only triplet-born lambs and pet lambs being fed creep. So, as part of the project on the farm and Farming Connect, we are now looking to do the same with the cattle, with reducing our bought-in feed costs. We're aiming to cut concentrate feeding over the first winter in order to gain compensatory growth while they're out grazing the fields in the summer months. We have done this with a couple of grazing methods, rotational grazing and implementing red clover into our existing lays. But I think Mark will get, where is he? He'll get into it more later, I think.
Okay, so just coming to the trials here and what we're aiming to do. In terms of the trials, we've basically looked at two different ways of trying to get that red clover into lays. So the first one was using a direct drill and just overseeding, and then the second one was scratching with an oppico harrow and just broadcasting it over the surface and then rolling. As well as that, we've done a trial with a seaweed biostimulant, which we'll mention straight after my talk. So you've got a bit of background of that product and what it's used for. The key point to it really is looking at that timing of establishment, really. When do we need to do it and what's the right time of year? So with this, what we were aiming to do was try and direct drill it into the sward in the spring and then have cuts of silage off it after that. So we've done two full cuts. But I think what we've probably realised is that grass in that spring is just outcompeting that seed a little bit too much. And maybe some of the development of that red clover hasn't come on as much as you'd hope. So what we'd be really aiming for, if you're going into grass to establish clover, is to try and put it in at the back end, maybe after a cut of silage or 2 cuts of silage, just to give it a little bit more chance to come. And if we had a little bit more time in the project to develop it over 2 to 3 years, that's what we would aim to do throughout. And then in terms of results, there was very little difference in terms of silage yield between direct drilling and the oppico harrow. Probably slightly better with the direct drill, but again, I wouldn't say there's any significant difference there with those results. We're aiming for, they were achieving about 4.2 tonne of fresh weight per acre along that line. But interestingly, we've used that the seaweed product, and that has shown an average of 0.75 of a tonne an acre increase in yield, or an 18% yield across those trials. So we'd have had replicates with and without seaweed for direct drill and the oppico harrow. And as you can see, we're approaching about 5 tonne with the one site and about 4.6 tonne from the other. So again, we're getting quite a benefit from there. It does look like there's a decent enough benefit there to get that extra yield. I think it's going to come down to price and whether that's worth it in terms of fertiliser use, or whether you look at this kind of product. Finally, just looking at the silage analysis. So these are the 2 cuts that we're taking earlier, and hopefully you can see from here that the silages are of pretty decent quality. We've got a D value of first cut at 65% and second cut at 66, ME at 10.7 and 10.9, and then the crude protein levels are 18 and 15%. So again, we've managed to achieve what we wanted. With that kind of diet, we should be able to get away with rolled barley only. There'd be no extra need to buy that concentrate. Barley at the moment, probably about £170 a tonne delivered rolled. So again, much cheaper product to bring in and feed those cattle at the moment. And again, there's no real requirement for protein, and that's where the extra cost of that ration is going to come from. But what I'll do, I'll hand over to Dom just to go over the seaweed and the product.
The reason why we're here today is because, as well as those fishers' jobs, we found out that our seaweed, which is obviously grown in the sea, could also have a really positive impact on the land. And we started doing that with the help of local growers who understood soils, and they turned our waste seaweed that we weren't turning into food, they turned that into basically a biofertilizer or a biostimulant. And we got amazing results from local growers of vegetables. And then as we researched this, we understood that actually it's good for all crops. And so we've been very lucky to be involved in this trial with Daniel, and actually to try out what happens when you spread seaweeds on grassland. But the most exciting thing we're doing is currently building a processing plant for turning wet seaweeds into this liquid biostimulants that we can spread on the fields. A biostimulant is something that basically isn't a fertilizer. It's not relying on the nutrients within the product to make the plant grow or the crop grow. It's about actually making the plant stronger so that it can do the following things. It can make the plant access more nutrients that are in the soil or around the root zone. It can make them use those nutrients more efficiently. It can make them be more resilient to stresses, whether that's drought or heat or salinity, by basically stimulating the plants to survive those things. And it can also make them enhance the plant defense. So the whole point about this is that, and hopefully we're seeing this, is it ultimately increases the amount of roots and shoots and the yield, increase in yield and the quality of the crop. So, we're really excited by the results.
Mae Rhodri a Claire Jones o fferm Brynllech eisoes wedi bod yn treialu gwahanol cymysgeddau o hadau ac wedi cael cryn dipyn o lwyddiant yn defnyddio gwndwn meillion coch yn ystod y blynyddoedd diwethaf. Mae meillion coch wedi helpu iddyn nhw i addasu'r hafau sychach rydyn ni wedi bod yn ei weld yn ddiweddar o blegyd y gwreiddiau dyfnach sydd gyda nhw. Nawr, o achos yr hafau sychach a'r perfformiad da gyda'r meillion coch yn anffodus mae'r caeau eraill sydd ddim wedi bod yn defnyddio'r hadau newydd yma ddim wedi bod yn perfformio cystal. Ac o ganlyniad i hynny, maen nhw wedi bod yn gorbori y rhai o'r caeau newydd o feillion coch yma. Felly, fel rhan o'r prosiect diweddara yma maen nhw wedi bod yn cynnal, maen nhw wedi bod yn defnyddio cymysgeddau hadau gwahanol gan gynnwys rhai ar gyfer gwndwn amlrywogaethol.
Chydig bach o hanes Brynllech, croeso i chi gyd yma, a diolch am ddod â tywydd ffafriol efo chi, mae'n neud byd o waniaeth fyny fa yma. Dydy ddim o hyd yn braf yma, a byd oedd dad yn iau mi fi oedd o'n cadw y rhan fwyaf o fuchod croes am y jeans, a fi o'n ddefed textile cross mules a felly mae fyd, ond byd oedd Gwanwyn ddim yn siwtio, doedd heini ddim yn licio ei lle yma, felly da ni wedi mynd, mae'n debyg yn groes i'r rhan fwyaf o bobl a mynd o wrth fridiau cyfandirol i fridiau cynhenid. Cadw di byd ond defed Cymreig a rhyw chydig o defed Suffolk a buches ddu Gymraeg i gyd sydd yn licio ei lle yma bob tywydd. Dwi'n bedwerydd cenedlaeth yn Ffermio Brynllech ers i'n hen daid dod yma i ffarmio fel Glas i ddwy chwaer, ac mi gymodd yn denantiaeth a wedyn da ni'n dal yma hyd yma. Dwi'n yn gwybod beth ddigwydd nesaf, os di Wil neu Glas isio cario peth ymlaen fyny fynydd nhw. Ond mae'n ffarm 600 a hanner o aceri, dros hanner hwnnw yn dir heb i wella, mae'r mynydd yn dros 300 acar yn triple SI. Da ni'n gorfod bod yn ofalus sydd da ni'n managio hwnnw dim ond efo defed, dim byd yn o'n y gaea. Sydd yn rhoi lot o bwysau ar beth da ni'n gallu gwneud i lawr, mae ddweud y gwir, a dyna un o'r prosiectau. Da ni wedi bod yn edrych ar sydd wedi cael edrych ar ôl y glaswelltir gorau yn well drwy drio cynnyrch rhywbeth ar y tir canolig fel tai, ond nhw'n ni drafod mwy am y prosiectau ni fel da ni'n mynd ymlaen, ie?
We're going to talk about multi-species lays. A multi-species lay isn't including docks. Well, it kind of is, okay? And we'll talk a bit more about docks. They have a value. Ryegrass is great, but it does dominate and is quite a niche. It limits the amount of things that live in it. There's just been a nice paper published looking at how much water a soil can infiltrate under different species. And ryegrass pure ryegrass came out at 3 centimetres an hour. Red clover came out at 20 centimetres an hour. So a 6-fold increase in water percolation going down rather than running off, going into the ground. So for years, and I was bred up on ryegrass is brilliant, ryegrass is king, we should all have ryegrass. If you haven't got 50% ryegrass, you're a poor farmer. I think we're changing, okay? And the multi-species lays, we've got all sorts of options about ryegrass, timothy, cocksfoot. Nothing new. You know, we started off back in the 30s with the Cockle Park mixtures, playing around with different things. They got different rooting habits, they've got different growth habits, they complement each other. They form different associations with fungi in the ground. We've also got the additions of, all right, red clover, we've got the remnants of what went in. How many years ago, Rodri, was this one done?
2 years ago, this one.
This one was 2.
The second one is better, but there's been lambs picking on this, whereas the others had 10 days of rest.
We've got red clover, we've got white clover, they all fix nitrogen. We've got bird's foot trefoil, we've got as-like clover. You go down the hill, we can do lucerne. So we've got all these legumes that can supply nitrogen, as well as providing real good source of pollinators. And then we've got your extra additions, and this is the expensive bit if you're buying multi-species lays. The chicories, the plantains, the burnets, the wild carrots, all the little pretty stuff that lasts for about 20 minutes and your sheep eat it and off we go. All right, the chicory and plantain do a bit more. But okay, so there's environmental benefits and there's production benefits. We've got lots of research that says actually if we've got multi-species, your lambs will basically go and eat what they want to eat. We've got some lovely work looking at cattle grazing, pure strips of ryegrass and pure strips of clover. And they spend 70% of their time eating clover. And in the afternoon, when the sugars are highest this time of day, they'll go and eat their ryegrass. They love to swap and have a diet that they want to eat. You will want to eat the same stuff all the time. So we provide them with a multi-species. It increases intakes, it increases animal performance. There are some claims for animal health benefits in terms of alimentive properties. So they do provide some animal health benefits, and as the sward matures, year 1 you might have 140 chicory plants a square metre. Year 2 you'll probably have 30. Year 3, there's one over there. Okay, so they last for a while, but if you're in a rotation you can keep that high spec multi-species lay. So yeah, yield, quality, seasonality. Rodri has an apology to make because the whole trial on this farm is set around what, Rodri? Drought, okay? But a lot of these species have really good deep tap roots. And there is plenty of evidence to say that it will give us a prolonged period of growth in a dry time. So hopefully, I don't want to wish a drought on it. We might get a prolonged dry spell next year. See how we go. I say there's lots of work looking at the environmental benefits in terms of soil quality. Obviously the pollinators, if you ever let it go to flower, it'll be full of pollinators. I can still grow 12, 13 tonne of dry matter on a multi-species sward. We can fatten lambs on it. I'll have a protein content 4 or 5% higher than a straight grass lay. So there's tons of benefits for it. How long it lasts, I don't know. We've done 1 year. The real value of multi-species lays is making them last 3, 4, 5 years. And ideally, what I'd love your multi-species lay to do is as the pretty stuff, the chicories and the plantains disappear, it turns into a white clover ryegrass sward. And it lasts for 15 years plus. What I don't want it to do is turn into a weed fest, and then you have to replace it after 3 years. Multi-species lay, lots of little tiny seeds. I want the bigger plant as possible. Quite a lot of them are slow to establish. The earlier I do it, the more chance you got of going through the winter. Anyway, it was first week in September it went in the ground. Well, last week in August went in the ground. It's all germinated, lovely. And then, if you remember, the first week in September last year, 27 degrees, and we cooked it, basically. So all the drill slots opened up. All those little tiny seedlings went, oh. So we didn't have a very good success on these 2 south-facing fields. The one on the bank, which is our grass white clover control, just about cope with it. So we had to do a second drilling in April.
Before the drought.
Before the drought that never came. So that was the process. So effectively we've got 2 fields that were drilled in April and 1 that was drilled the September before. And Farming Connect guys have been measuring grass growth on these for the last 3 and a bit months. And basically we're looking at yield data on the 4 plots. The red bar is your old lay that didn't really do much in June. And if we look at the total production over the last 3 months, my highest production is treatment number 1, which is the Barenberg grass mix. 10% less, not a lot, is the nice Oliver's Landmark multi-species mix. Then comes my ryegrass, clover sward. 40% less grass in that field there than your reseed. It's always nice to see reseeds outperform because it costs you a lot of money. It's a lot of hassle. 40% extra grass. That's only in 3 months. Chances are, all the new lays really perform September, October, November. They'll keep going, and it should give you more spring growth as well. So it really pays for itself. We've done some quality assessments, just looking at energy and protein. I've got almost 1.5 extra ME, which makes a huge difference when we're trying to put finished lambs, put condition on ewes. The questions are always, can we keep it? How's it going to fare with a hard winter? How's it going to fare with a drought? So it's a nice project that hopefully we can carry on measuring.
Mae rhan fwyaf ffermwyr yn gwybod y broblem mae dail tafol yn gallu achosi wrth ei reoli, yn enwedig pan fod meillion yn y cwestiwn. Brynllell yw'r ffarm gyntaf i dreialu'r chwynladdwr newydd o'i fath yma yn y Deyrnas Unedig.
This is the field, as you can see, treated on the right-hand side, untreated on the left-hand side. So you can see the level of docks that there was present across the field. And as Roger said, it was a 5-year lay, so it was more established docks. And you can see, it's a pretty straight line across of the treatment that's gone in. It's going to be, well, hopefully, once the approval comes, it'll be on new sown lays and established lays. Slightly lower dose rate for a new sown lay, but the same product for established lay as well. It's safe on white clover as a new sown lay, and then it's also safe on red clover, but that'll be in the year after sowing. So as long as it's had like a winter season between the sowing for the red clover. I think it's fair to say Rodri was a little bit apprehensive on the clover. You can see some transitory effects on the clover after an application, but have a look through the field. Obviously, this is the treated and the untreated. The level of the clover is on par between both, so you can sometimes see a little bit of an effect. But as you can see, it grows back and is still very healthy. We are doing some more work on some other herbs and other species that it's safe or unsafe on, and we've had some good trials this year on herbal lays, and that includes things like chicory, plantain, the bird's foot trefoil that we were talking about, yarrows. And different species to look at. We've found that obviously the clovers are all safe, and especially on a new sown lay, the timing for those was a little bit early as well. But the clovers are all safe. The chicory looks to be safe as well, and we've had a few trials now where the chicory looks safe, and also the bird's foot trefoil, interestingly, was safe as well. Across the country, we've been doing lots of different trials to look at weed screening and herbal species screening as well, to see what species we think will be safe on. And there'll be information as we find out more as the product comes through and more data comes through about it. So one of the guidelines within the product when it comes, it has to be applied with drift reduction nozzles, and I think that was a bit of a question about when we applied it, what classifies as a drift reduction nozzle. It is common practice for most sprayers now to have a drift reduction nozzle, and when you go to get new nozzles, it's on the labels, it's there as information, so it should be pretty straightforward to get a drift reduction nozzle. And that just helps, obviously, if there's a slight wind and it stops the drift. It reduces that level of drift and stopping the sprays getting in areas that, waterways and things that we don't want we want to keep sprays out of. It's obviously in here we can see the docks. Buttercup is another weed it's very good on, and chickweed and also dandelions is the key weeds. At the moment, it won't do thistles, but we've got more products kind of in the pipeline. These things take up to 10 years to get through and get to the market. So that's why, yeah, this one, we're itching, we're so close. So hopefully in the next few weeks, it'll be approved for the spring use. Because of the clover, like the clovers, you'll know, it likes to be growing in warmer temperatures. So we say when you apply the product to wait until, it's warm enough and the clover's healthy and growing before you apply the product. Likewise with the docks, as we mentioned this year, the docks seemed, across a lot of our trial sites, to, when you cut them, go to head really quickly. So ideally, you want a dinner plate size dock with fresh green leaves. I know it's not always a practical scenario and it's difficult to get into that scenario, but that's when you're going to get the best kill of the docks. So, this lay, there are obviously a few docks you can see that are still there, but that could be for next year. It'll be a sequential treatment to get on top of them. After that, then you should be able to go and spot treat anything, because there's always going to be seedling docks that come up through the lay. We always say it wants to be healthy growing grass. Don't be treating grass that's stressed. If it's dry, we're in a drought, you don't want to be treating it then. You want the grass to be green, growing, and fresh growth. Likewise with the docks, you want them to be fresh and green and growing through. As a new sown lay, we've seen our trials in Lampeter is a sea of docks basically, and it's completely cleared, and that's sequential years as well, that it's holding those docks back. We were just talking about it on the way up as well. If it is, a reseeded lay, and it's a new sown lay, and it previously was quite an old lay with a lot of mature docks with deep tap roots, you're better to go in with a glyphosate as well to reduce some of those tap roots, and then go in with the Pro Clover after to reduce that established docks coming back.
Cofiwch, mae mwy o wybodaeth am unrhyw un o'n prosiectau ar ein gwefan. Hefyd, os hoffech fwy o wybodaeth am unrhyw rhain gwasanaethau, cysylltwch at swyddog datblygu lleol.
Ac mae yna ddigwyddiadau wythnosol yn cael eu chynnal gan Cyswllt Ffermio, felly fyddwn ni'n edrych ymlaen at eich gweld yn rhai o'r digwyddiadau hynny. Ond tan y tro nesaf, welwn i chi yn y rhifyn nesaf.